You've had the keys a week. The gates roll open, the castle throws its shadow across the plaza, and the whole place smells like churros and sunscreen. A family of four counts out cash at the turnstile, money they saved all year, handed straight to you. Multiply that family by the crowd pushing in behind them, and it looks like a license to print money. The top line numbers agree. Magic Kingdom alone pulled 17.84 million visitors in 2024, the most visited park on Earth for the 19th year running, per the TEA/AECOM index, and the world's top 25 parks did around 246 million visits between them. But before you fall in love with the crowd, one number should shape the entire deal. Roughly 20 parks capture more than 90% of all the theme park revenue on the planet. A tiny handful win enormously. Everyone else fights over scraps. Filling the park was never the hard part. Knowing which business you're actually buying is. Let's answer that the way the money answers it. Follow one family, $1 at a time, from the parking booth to the hotel checkout. The Riveras. 2 adults, 2 kids, 1 minivan. Watch where their money actually goes, because almost none of it lands where you'd guess. The first dollar leaves their wallet before they've seen a single ride. Parking. At Walt Disney World, that's $35 a day as of October 2025. At Universal Orlando, it's $30. The Riveras haven't touched a churro, a ticket, or a t-shirt, and you've already collected on a patch of asphalt. On a packed day across a big resort, that one toll is a 6 to 7 figure line before the turnstiles even spin. Which is the whole thesis in miniature. The gate is the least of it. Now the ticket. You'd assume admissions are the money. Industry-wide, tickets were 44% of all U.S. theme park revenue in 2025, according to Mordor Intelligence. Fewer than half your dollars come through the gate. The other, roughly 56%, food, merchandise, parking, hotels, line skips, is where you actually live. A theme park is a real estate-backed, fixed-cost machine that assembles a captive crowd and turns it into per-head spending, and it eats capital forever. The rides are how you gather the crowd. The machine is everything that happens after. The Riveras didn't buy day tickets. Last spring, they bought season passes, and that's float. A season pass is paid up front and booked as deferred revenue. You hold the family's money for months before they ever show up, and you keep it whether they come 10 times or never. Six Flags, now merged with the old Cedar Fair, was sitting on $461 million of deferred revenue in June 2025, cash banked before a single turnstile had spun. And passes aren't a niche product. Back in 2019, they were 53% of Cedar Fair's entire attendance, nearly 15 million of its 28 million visits. The unused pass, the one the family never gets around to redeeming, is near pure margin cash. And every visit they do make is a fresh chance to sell them food, parking, and upgrade. Attendance is vanity, per cap is sanity. The money is in how much each guest spends once inside, not how many showed up. How much is that, really? Here's the one big operator honest enough to print a dollar figure. At United Parks, SeaWorld's parent, total per capita spending in 2024 was $80.07. Of that, admission was only $43.61, and it actually fell, while in-park spending hit a record $36.46. Disney, for the record, will never give you that number. It reports only percentage changes, and in 2025, it told us attendance was down slightly while per-guest spending rose. And when someone tells you parks print 65% margins, correct them. Operators chase 60% gross margin on a single hot dog, sure, but the actual business nets somewhere between 20 and 40% EBITDA, operating profit before loan payments, taxes, and write-offs, and that's true, in the Park DB's words, regardless of size. So follow the Riveras inside, because now you're running the per-cap machine, and every inch of the park is built to feed it. Walt Disney coined a word for it, weenie. A castle, a spaceship Earth, a visual magnet at the end of a sightline that pulls the crowd down a predictable, retail-lined path. Rides famously exit through gift shops, timed to the emotional peak when the wallet is loosest. Although the industry now actively debates that funnel, cram a shop too tight against a ride exit and you get a crowd jam that stops people buying. So newer parks treat retail as a destination instead. Then comes the part that quietly does the heavy lifting, taking the sting out of paying at all. Cashless wristbands, Disney's Magic Band, Universal's Virtual Line, Volcano Bay's Tapu Tapu, turn every purchase into a tap, And in 2025, 67% of major parks offered in-app food ordering, up from 34% in 2020. Money you tap is money you don't feel leaving. And then there's the single cleverest line item in the modern park, the queue. For over 2 decades, Disney gave FastPass away for free, from 1999 to 2021, training a whole generation to skip the line at no charge. Then, it took the line back and sold it. Genie Plus, now Lightning Lane, charges to do what used to be free. According to a Wall Street Journal report, the Lightning Lane Multipass pulled in more than $720 million pre-tax at Walt Disney World alone between October 2021 and June 2024. That figure excludes Disneyland and the a la carte single lanes, so the true number is bigger. The products now run anywhere from $129 to $449 per person per day. The company built the inconvenience, the line, then sold the guest the cure. Once you can see that, you can see the whole business. But here's where you stop thinking like a guest and start thinking like the owner. The rides the Riveras came for are, in cold financial terms, closer to bait than to product. The real prize is what the crowd does next. Books rooms, eats, buys a timeshare. Disney Vacation Club sells a points-based ownership interest across 17 resorts to around 250,000 members, then rents out the rooms those members don't book as pure cash inventory. But the deepest layer is the land itself. The asset is the roughly 25,000 acres of Central Florida underneath the park. The rides assemble the crowd, the vacation monetizes the land. One honest caveat: rides are a loss leader for real estate is an inference, not a company line. Disneyland Paris ran its on-site hotels for a decade and booked about $3.6 billion of revenue without ever turning a profit on them. The land play is real, but not automatic. Location and balance sheet decide it. But you can't weigh any of that until you own the thing, and there's no single price to own one, only a ladder. At the small end, a bolt-on. The old Cedar Fair paid $261 million for 2 Texas Schlitterbahn water parks in 2019. For a whole operator, Blackstone took SeaWorld private for somewhere between $2.3 and $2.7 billion in 2009. Merlin, the Legoland and Madame Tussauds group, went private for around £6 billion including debt in 2019. And Cedar Fair and Six Flags merged in 2024 at roughly an $8 billion enterprise value, what it costs to buy the whole business with its debt, about 6.5 to 7 times EBITDA. That multiple is the whole game. A park changes hands at 6 to 8 times its EBITDA, which means the price you pay is really a bet on next year's attendance times per cap. And if you'd rather build than buy, the mega tier is a different scale entirely. Universal's Epic Universe in Orlando cost an estimated $7 billion, and Universal has never confirmed even that. Across 750 acres, opening in May 2025, by most accounts the most expensive theme park ever built in the country. Even the incumbents can't stop. Disney has committed $60 billion over about 10 years to its experiences division, roughly 70% of it to add capacity, sitting on a land bank of more than 1,000 acres, about 7 Disneylands. There's the paradox of this asset in one line. Parks are simultaneously Disney's single biggest profit engine and its single biggest capital sink. That covers the money coming in and the check to get in. Neither is the part that kills owners. This is the cost of simply keeping the doors open before a single admission clears as profit. The defining fact of the whole business is the shape of that cost. It's overwhelmingly fixed, while the revenue is entirely variable. You staff, power, insure, maintain, and tax a small city, whether 5,000 people walk in or 50,000. The cleanest number sits in the 2025 fiscal year. The combined Six Flags ran its parks across 5,738 operating days and turned $3.1 billion of revenue into $792 million of adjusted EBITDA, about 74 cents of every dollar gone to operating cost before a penny of interest, capital spending, or write-downs. The biggest slice of that is labor. Industry estimates put it around a third of revenue, and the scale is city-sized. Walt Disney World employs roughly 80,000 people, the largest single-site employer in the United States, and when it went dark in 2020, it furloughed about 43,000 of them, which tells you exactly how much payroll it carries in a normal week. Then there's the cost nobody escapes, the reinvestment treadmill. A theme park that stops building starts dying. Attendance quietly decays the moment the new thing stops arriving, which makes capital spending less a choice than rent you pay to the future. Cedar Fair, before the merger, plowed roughly 16 to 18% of revenue back in, on a plan of 500 to 525 million a year. United Parks guides to $250 million or so annually, which means the number everyone quotes, EBITDA, overstates what you actually keep, because you have to subtract that permanent capital spending reserve to find real owner cash. And you're taxed like the small city you are. Walt Disney World paid more than $161 million of the roughly $185 million in property taxes its special district collected in 2022. Purely a measure of the scale of the tax bill, nothing more. Stack it up, and a mid-sized regional park can owe $80 to $100 million in fixed operating and maintenance cost before one admission turns into profit. And that sets up the mechanism that ends most owners. One master mechanism wearing three faces: operating leverage. Because about 70% of your costs don't move, a modest dip in demand doesn't nick your profit, it guillotines it. The first face is the calendar. SeaWorld's own filings say roughly 2/3 of its attendance and revenue arrive in the second and third quarters. 4 summer months have to pay for all 12, and a rained-out peak week has no makeup date. The second is debt, the fixed cost with no give. In fiscal 2024, Six Flags carried nearly $5 billion of net debt and owed $234 million in interest. That year, its operating income of around $310 million actually covered that interest with room to spare, and the net loss it still reported came mostly from a one-time, non-cash tax charge tied to its merger, not from the operations. But that's exactly the point. The interest, like rent, doesn't shrink when the crowd's thin. It's the line with no give, and when a bad year finally arrives, it's the one that breaks you. The following year's headline loss of $1.6 billion looks even scarier, but most of it, about $1.5 billion, was a non-cash goodwill write-down, not an operating collapse. The park still threw off that same wall of EBITDA. And the third is the seductive one, the sale-leaseback. Cash-strapped owners sell the land under their parks and lease it back for instant money today, but you've just traded an asset that costs nothing to sit still for an upward-only rent that never falls in a bad year. Merlin did a version in 2007, a £622 million, 35-year upward-only lease that kept billing right through the COVID closures. And in 2026, EPR Properties bought the real estate under 7 Six Flags parks for $331 million. Sell the land, and you've turned a fixed cost you owned into a fixed cost you rent forever. Which is exactly how owners die, and 2 collapses show how. The first is a leverage story. Six Flags filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on June 13, 2009, with about $3 billion in assets against roughly $2.4 billion in debt, and more than $400 million coming due within a year that it simply could not refinance in a frozen credit market. The parks themselves were operationally fine. What failed was the capital structure, and the company emerged in 2010 having cut debt from about $2.7 billion to $1 billion. The second is the one to remember, a demand shock story. Hard Rock Park in Myrtle Beach, a roughly $400 million build that opened in April 2008 and filed for bankruptcy about 5 months later, in September, as Lehman Brothers collapsed and consumer spending froze. It earned only about $21 million against more than $30 million owed, sat 5 hours up the coast from Orlando's gravity, and sold out of bankruptcy for around $25 million, a 94% markdown on the build cost. Every failure mode in this business fired at once. Enormous fixed cost, brand new debt, 1 season to prove itself, a recession shock, and, fatally, no season pass annuity in year 1 to cushion the fall. And in case you think scale and a magic name are armor, Hong Kong Disneyland has been profitable in only about 4 of its first 20 years, with roughly $1.1 billion in accumulated losses. You'll see its cost quoted as $14.1 billion, but that's Hong Kong dollars from a 1999 construction line. The real total project cost was about $3.5 billion US. So who actually wins? Germany's Mack family run Europa Park, the counterexample that proves the whole thesis. 6 million plus visitors and over €1 billion of turnover in 2023-24. Why does it endure where the leveraged giants buckle? Because it's the mirror image of them. The Macks build their own roller coasters. They own the manufacturer, so the reinvestment treadmill costs them less. And they run on patient family capital with no leveraged buyout debt hanging over a rainy summer. Same industry, opposite balance sheet, opposite outcome. These figures are an illustrative model for a single regional park, but the margins underneath them are real, taken from what United Parks and Six Flags actually reported. In 2024, United Parks turned about 1.7 billion of revenue into roughly 700 million of adjusted EBITDA, a 41% EBITDA margin, though after depreciation the operating margin was closer to 27. The newly combined Six Flags ran closer to 25, so a well-run regional park lives somewhere in the 25 to 40% EBITDA range, before interest and before the capital spending it can never skip. Your park does 2 million guests at a blended $55 per cap. That's 110 million of revenue. At a 33% EBITDA margin, you clear about 36 million. But you're not done. You owe roughly 10% of revenue, about 11 million, in maintenance and new ride spending to keep next year's crowd from shrinking. And if you bought the park with debt, interest runs, call it 15 million. Take it all out. 36 minus 11 minus 15 leaves about 10 million of owner cash before tax. In a good year, it works. Same park, one soft season. A recession, a rainy summer, a weak pass campaign knocks attendance down 20% to 1.6 million guests. To defend the gate, you discount, so per cap slips 5% to $52. Revenue drops to about 83 million, down 25%. And here's where the fixed costs turn on you. They barely move because 70% of them are fixed. The rides still need maintaining, insuring, and staffing for the crowd that didn't come. Your EBITDA margin compresses from 33% to around 22, and your EBITDA is roughly halved, from 36 million to about 18. But the two lines beneath it don't shrink. Interest is still 15 million. Debt doesn't care about the weather. And even if you slash reinvestment to 8 million, you've got 18 minus 8 minus 15, and you're about 5 million underwater. Same park, same rides. A 25% revenue dip just cut your EBITDA in half and pushed your equity negative. That's operating leverage, and it's why a 20% bad year doesn't cost you 20%. It costs you everything. It's what took down Six Flags in 2009 and Hard Rock in 2008, and what hit every park on Earth in 2020. And there's a second turn of the screw. The one lever you can pull in a bad year, deferring that reinvestment, is the exact lever that guarantees a worse crowd next year. You can protect this year's cash or next year's attendance, not both. So here's the deal on the table. What you actually bought was the crowd, and the crowd is the most fixed cost, most weather exposed, first to be cut in a recession asset in all of entertainment. The best operators in this business barely mention their rides. They talk about per cap, the number for how much a guest spent after they'd already paid to get in. Own one, and you're a landlord and a retailer who happens to own a castle, and the castle is the cheapest thing you'll buy. So the next time a park brags about record attendance, you'll know to ask what actually pays. How much did each of those guests spend once they were inside? Remember the family from the opening, counting out cash at the turnstile? That ticket was the smallest check they'd write you all day. Everything you can't see them spend yet, the parking, the churro, the skip the line, the room, that's the business you actually bought.